I'm on the phone with Kelly Goto, principal and founder of GotoMedia, a San Francisco-based consulting firm specializing in web design. Kelly is also an author, blogger about the mobile user experience, and frequent speaker on the web professional event circuit. Kelly, good morning, and thanks for agreeing to the interview.
Well, thanks, Bill, for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you.
I appreciate that. In fact, to jog your memory, you may recall we were collaborating on a web design contest where you were the judge. In fact, it was 1 year to the day after 9/11, and someone called a bomb threat seconds before the judging.
Oh, right, exactly.
Do you remember that?
Yes, because it was Moscone, and we had to evacuate. I think, was that part of it? I remember we had to evacuate.
We had to bail out of the building, and the guard said, "You're out of here," and I said, "Not without my laptop."
Right, exactly. And I remember there was a couple of people I was with, and they started to cry, and I said, we're okay. But the funny thing is, I thought when you were referencing 9/11, that was actually 2001 was the day that our book came out, and we were having obviously a party that got canceled that day. But I thought that's what you were referencing. But now I remember, yeah. Oh my gosh, that's right.
It was. I guess right. Larry Ellison was in town.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a building close by.
Oh, my goodness.
Somebody didn't like Larry, so they decided to evacuate the whole neighborhood.
Wow. Yes, I remember. Well, good to talk to you again. It's been a while.
Wild times. Well, listen, Kelly, you were going to give a presentation at the Voices That Matter VTM conference.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it was canceled last month in San Francisco, and your session topic was on Beyond Usability. Emotion as the new user experience. And I have some questions for you.
Great.
Can you summarize that session? And what were some of the key takeaways that you want web designers to know about Beyond Usability?
Well, as you mentioned, we've been looking at the mobile space pretty intently over the past several years, if not a decade, and watching everything change and grow and waiting for that moment of convergence where everything changes, and everyone can, call it what they will, but it's obviously the age of the iPhone, and a lot of things have shifted in our industry. So we are finally seeing user experience take a whole nother level of, importance in the industry, and it kind of almost relates back to the product industry in terms of history. But what we've been finding is that it's more contextual than ever and behavior driven, and it's no longer, people are locked to their desktops and experiences based on expectations of the past, but there's a whole new sort of horizon blooming where emotion and attachment and sensory experiences are becoming really prevalent. And as user experience practitioners, we need to pay attention to that and grow with those themes. So the conference topic was about the new user experience, but one of the things that I quickly state is this is not new. We've actually been dealing this, like I mentioned, the product industry has been dealing with emotional values in products and lifestyle driven for decades now, and we're just catching up. And I think we've had the mindset to do this for a long time, but really we haven't had the ability to, because the products and services haven't quite gotten to that point where we could take another step forward.
Could you give an example of, what that might look like?
Yeah. Okay. So, just in terms of looking at the background of sensory engineering, as they would call it, in the 1960s, there was a lot of discussion about functional deployment of products and services. Then in the 70s, this term Kansei engineering came out, and it's from Japan. And I was mispronouncing it at this other conference. I was saying Kansai, and it was so funny because I'm Japanese, but I'm fourth generation. So 2 white guys came up to me and said that I was really, really mispronouncing that word. So it's Kansei. And Kansei means feelings and being able to measure the feelings and adapt to product lifestyle. So then in the 80s, some other things came, but really in the 1990s, Kansei was introduced into the U.S., and it's taken until now to really integrate into what we call user experience and the stuff that we do. So an example, that we've been using is understanding sort of I guess, the difference between a practical user experience and more of an emotional user experience. And the easiest way to think about that is practical tends to be things that you're aware of. It's more explicit. And it might be things like an interface, either you're able to complete your task or not, or you complete your task in a certain amount of time. You can read the labels. Something is clear and it makes sense, and you can get through steps A through Z in a fairly succinct manner. And that was traditionally usability testing gave us a lot of that information. Well, what we're moving into is more of emotional user experience, where people are unaware of how and why they get there. It's very implicit in terms of the information that we're getting and gathering, and it has a lot more to do with qualitative research and lifestyle design. And that leads a little bit more towards the field of ethnography. So I call myself a design ethnographer, and I'm really careful actually about how I use that term ethnography, because we aren't saying that you can go out and just be an ethnographer or an anthropologist. But what we are saying is take the best of the traits of that field and apply it to user experience and research, and understand about observing people's lifestyle and getting to that unaware and unmet need area. So I'll give you some more succinct examples, but practical versus emotional, aware versus unaware. And emotional research, we tend to get more qualitative information and information that we have to decipher. How are people really feeling? And what we're trying to get to are, what are their unmet needs, and how can we make this possible for them using these products or services? So an example is a while ago, Ethnography actually came to us and asked us to determine if their product was addictive, and they wanted to understand what addictive meant. And what's really interesting is so many companies come up and say, hey, we want to make our site sticky. We want to make it addictive. And we went ahead and did this research, which was what we call mixed method, which consists of some qualitative and quantitative information that's mixed. But basically, to decipher that is you run surveys, you conduct user interviews, and then we go out and do both a combination of usability testing and also observational reporting on subjects. So what we did was we went to 2 different cities, and we also did stakeholder interviews and all this, and we broke down what their behavior was, and in the end showed Technorati that we cannot create addiction, but what we can understand are what people's rituals are. And in knowing that, we can start using aspects of functionality to usability to more emotional impact to help meet their needs. What was it about Technorati that was so, quote, addicting? And how can we replicate that? And so that was really interesting for them to see, and we were able to create new personas for them and help them understand how they might market and target a little bit more successfully in that area. So does that kind of help?
Yeah, excellent. Sounds like
unravel it?
I appreciate that. It does unravel, and I came across that term just on your website, and I've been reading up a bit about it. And I'm glad you pronounce it, because I'm struggling with exactly. It's from a Greek ethnos and folk people to write science and contextualization. So that's good. So, another question for you, if I could. Kelly, you're
Sure.
a web designer and a usability expert, and you specialize in a lot of interesting areas. And I'm curious to know this. So we've matured, or I'll preface the question by saying this. It's clear that we've matured as a profession a great deal, right? We're learning from sciences that were laid out before us, and that's really a great thing. In addition to that, we're taking this web experience to whole new levels. So with all that said, from a designer point of view, how important do you think it is today, given the complexity and the specialization of web design? Would it be for web designers to have a solid understanding, if not be proficient in markup and scripting?
Oh, that's interesting. Just throw it over to the other side of the mental world for me for a minute. Okay. Well, I mean, you ask a really good question. In our company, we believe in having a staff and a team that is proficient in many different areas. So we have combinations, I guess, that make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes from more of a fuzzy area for strategy and envisioning and branding all the way to scripting into development. And I would say that you have to, as a designer, understand where your proficiencies are, and you need to be kind of right and left brained. So we have an amazing amount of designers on our team that are proficient in coding and scripting, and they experiment in code, and they design thinking of code. And that was sort of the magic key towards web design for so many years, and it definitely continues to be. So quick answer to your question is yes, they should be proficient in scripting, and they should understand it, and you should have access to whatever JavaScript libraries make the most sense to you. You should pick a framework or two that you have a lot of knowledge about, so you can think about modular design, and as you develop in wireframe, you can think about the framework that you're going to be building for, and that's going to be the best way for a designer to actually continue to sort of migrate their thinking. And that is at a base level. As we move into, I think, a broader sense of product and service offerings, you're never going to be a one person doing it all. So then designers, based on their proficiency, let's say that I just, it's not my thing to be a coder. Well, it's really, really important that you understand the capabilities. You see, what's happening with HTML5 and where CSS is going, and you understand, again, your frameworks and your libraries. But maybe sort of the things that I'm talking about with emotional research, it helps roadmap and pave a way for the future. So it's giving your company or your team or yourself as an individual some important areas of user experience to shoot for that you may not be able to pull your head out of the code and see unless you're at a little bit of a different mindset and a different level. So I wouldn't say every designer needs to be a coder, but someone on your team needs to understand that. And it's super important for us that our coders are visual designers, because we need that mix of right and left brain to really make it work.
Well said. I certainly appreciate that summary. As you were saying that, I was thinking, for those that have the benefit of working on a team, that's fantastic. Clearly, however, many web designers are freelance and they have to wear multiple hats. So I suppose it's even more important for those folks to be left and right brain.
Oh, yeah. And, Doug Bowman really did it first, and he was one of the first rock star web designers because he had the ability to think both left, right brain and apply his design sensibility to code. And obviously Dave Shea with CSS Zen Garden, and that shifted the way that we thought about design and what's possible with coding. And it just continues to shift and change and evolve. But, the magic button really is someone that is thirsty for knowledge, that dives into it, that has an aesthetic sense. And whether they start out as coders and shift into design, or they start off in design and they open themselves up to learning about code, either way is going to work. And we have a mix of those people on our team. So I do think that sets us apart in terms of being able to offer a higher level quality of service, because we don't have independent designers working and coders working separately. In terms of setting apart from the industry, obviously that's what people are searching for at companies. And, everyone hopefully can get to that point, but it's a tough space to be in, and it's a real, you have to be a real expert in both areas to make it work as an individual.
Kelly, we certainly appreciate your perspective, all the things that you do to support the web profession, and certainly for your time today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's fun to, kind of think about these things. I hope that next time you're in town, we can.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kelly. Really, I think you bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table, and what you had to say was terrific. I learned some new things, and then, you validate some of the points that we've, learned and we teach, actually.